Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Greenwald. I'm the CEO of Greenwald Research. This is a milestone year for Greenwald. We're commemorating our 40th anniversary. And to celebrate, we are hosting a series of thought-provoking webinars throughout the year. We'll be speaking with thought leaders and industry experts from across retirement, benefits, and health to share insights on topics that are important to us at Greenwald and to our clients and our friends. Please be sure to visit our website at greenwaldresearch.com for updates on future events. But for today, I am absolutely delighted to introduce our star-studded panel of defined contribution retirement income experts. Retirement income, protected income, guaranteed lifetime income, whatever you call it, has become a driving trend for DC plans and is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. And again, delighted to be hosting this esteemed panel on the topic. So I'm going to make some introductions before we get started. First, we have Karen Neeley of Pacific Life. Karen is the head of Institutional Retirement Solutions, where she leads the pension risk transfer and defined contribution lifetime income lines of business. In that role, she's responsible for go-to-market strategy, product development, distribution, operations, and customer engagement. Next, we have Keith Namiot, who is head of Guardian's annuity business, focused on expanding Guardian's presence in both the retail and in-plan annuity markets. Previously, Keith led Equitable's institutional markets team, overseeing their participation in AllianceBernstein's lifetime income solution and BlackRock's LifePath Paycheck. And last but never least, Jennifer DeLong of AllianceBernstein. Jen is a senior vice president, managing director, and head of defined contribution, responsible for leading the defined contribution business in North America. She oversees product management and development, marketing, participant communications, and client services for the firm's institutional, custom target date, and lifetime income solution clients. Each of our panelists today are going to share some insights with you, and they're going to answer some of my questions. But if you have questions, we will take those at the end. Please submit them through the chat or Q&A, and I'll be sure to keep an eye on that for when we are ready. We're going to start with Karen, who's going to share some views from the participant perspective. Karen, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So great to be here. As I think about lifetime income, I think it's important, first and foremost, to start with the participant, but I would be remiss to not talk about the tremendous progress that's come surrounding that participant adoption. So first and foremost, we have made tremendous progress, and I think Keith and Jen will agree, over the past 2 decades, 3 decades, what we've evolved as an industry is incredible. And I think it's important to define that utilization, define that progress, starting with the participant. We've all seen different stats and studies. I think, Lisa, your research shows 86% of participants want their employer to offer an income solution. But as we've gone deeper in some of our research at Pacific Life, what we found is, as we've looked at the process for an annuity selection from an individual, the correlation between their financial literacy and annuity literacy, only about 28% of individuals, of participants, have what we would call a high annuity literacy. So if I contrast that to the 9 out of 10 or nearly 9 out of 10 individuals who think their employer should offer the lifetime income solution, we have a big disconnect in terms of the actual literacy to then drive to the adoption, which then begs the question of how do we drive that as an industry? And I mentioned, again, it's how do we get to the participant? How do we support them as plan sponsors, as employers? And then ultimately, how do we collectively on this call and beyond as an industry support? And if I think through how do we drive, progress between that 9 out of 10 and the 28%, what are the education needs? And if I go back to day one of employment, I often say retirement begins on day one of employment. So as plan sponsors, how are we supporting the participants with education, with tools, with communication. One example is, we often call these plans retirement savings plans, not retirement plans. We've done so much as an industry in terms of the autos and getting people to that right amount of savings, but we've left them at the top of the hill, at the top of the cliff, waiting to accumulate without a true retirement plan. And I, again, keeping that theme alive of first and foremost the participant in the center and how do we provide them that support. Single digit percentages of plans currently are offering a lifetime income solution. How do we drive that number up? And then I get to as an industry, what are the things that we can help do to help support, to drive plans? We think about the advisor and the consultant community surrounding these plans and supporting them. Again, on the education front, there's been a lot of progress made in terms of different education opportunities and for both an advisor and a plan sponsor to help them understand these solutions. And we've made progress from a legislative front with Secure 1.0 and 2.0. But at the end of the day, as we think through driving participants and enabling them to take advantage of these critically important solutions, it really kind of going left to right in that way is going to take continuing to drive that education and communication through plans, continuing to support plans and adoption. And I would say certainly as an industry, continuing to support and advance the great efforts that came out of Secure 1.0 and 2.0, continuing to advance and alleviate barriers for plans to ultimately adopt in order for participants to ultimately elect these solutions. So I think from a overarching perspective, I would say tremendous progress, more to continue to be done. But as you can hear in each of those stages, the education piece is going to be critical.
So Karen, tell me a little bit about how we should define or think about utilization. What is the right measure? Is it utilization or some other metric where we can measure engagement and uptake of these solutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say the blanket answer is how many individuals, how many participants are actually getting to adopt these solutions. But I don't think that is a comprehensive enough measure. If you think about it, you can't make a 25-year-old 65, right? So in some ways, demographics need to happen in order for participants to be at the point to elect these solutions when I think of an at-retirement solution versus a solution that's embedded throughout accumulation. So I think measuring straight participant adoption is a component, but it's not a comprehensive enough component as we think through what is true utilization. What we need to do, and I think we've been doing a good job of this as an industry, is continue to measure each of those points along the way. So I mentioned the single-digit adoption of plans. How are we seeing that number? And really a rising tide lifts all boats with that. How do we continue to get more plan sponsors to adopt? How do we get more advisors to help champion these solutions and be that guide for plans as they're thinking through the criticality of this and really the how and the why of doing this? And then ultimately continuing to monitor as an industry, where are we in terms of legislation? I mentioned Secure 1.0 and 2.0. Are there additional elements to enhance that safe harbor protection that came out? Are there additional elements coming out of retirement income disclosure in terms of our statements? So a more difficult measure when you think of all of the different points along the way, but certainly more comprehensive. And I truly think it's critical that we're measuring each of these different pieces, including the enhancement of education that comes out along each of those phases of the journey. How robust is it? How easily accessible is it? How many advisors are championing and supporting these solutions? I should mention from the conversations we're having in market, it's no longer a tell me about these solutions, tell me why. It's tell me how to go about doing that. So more qualitative than quantitative, but certainly another indicator that more plans are looking for ways to implement solutions and ultimately making them accessible for their participants.
I couldn't agree more, at least especially on the point of participant demand, right? We used to hear there's no participant demand. I mean, whether it's Greenwald or all of us collectively in different ways, I think we've demonstrated participant demand. But if we think about driving participants to actually be in those solutions, what do you see as the role of defaults in
So
driving utilization in that way?
yeah, I would champion what we saw on the accumulation side, on the getting people up the curve, as I mentioned in that metaphor, and the power that defaults had in terms of target date fund, in terms of enrollment, in terms of getting to the right amount of savings. I think there is a critically important element of default and overall plan design. So even beyond default, partial annuitization support, et cetera, but the power of default, especially to help. And I'll go back to that 28% figure I mentioned. There's not a high level of understanding. These are critical solutions, and I think at times they can feel more complex. But ultimately, when you break it down, there's a relative simplicity to it. But if we can leverage default more option and more often throughout both that accumulation phase and even at retirement phase, where applicable, where it makes sense for the plan, where it makes sense for the participant, I do think that is going to be a key facet that helps us get over some of the, I'll say, adoption inertia.
Yes, and then Jen, what are your thoughts on how we should be measuring utilization and the role of defaults in enhancing that?
So I think Karen really touched on quite a few key points there, but perhaps to summarize, right, I think there's maybe three different things to think about, right? So access. So is a guarantee available in your guaranteed income solution available in your plan, right? That's probably the first way to measure it. Then there's participation in the investment option, up to the point where someone has the last option to consider, which is activation. And I think, I mean, the success of these solutions is really going to be measured ultimately in activation, right? So when you have access and when you're participating, are enough participants actually activating the guaranteed income solution and utilizing that as a critical part of their retirement, in addition to Social Security and other savings sources.
Yeah, and maybe,
Jen, thoughts
yeah,
on defaults?
well, I'd maybe just add, I certainly agree with Keith in that last point. I think we're years away still from being able to measure how many participants actually will use that guaranteed income. We want them to be able to use the benefit that they've got in their plan. Clearly, it does start with first the plan sponsor making it available. I think Keith used the word access. And then, of course, making sure participants are actually using them. And, I would just add, as a provider of a lifetime income solution, I know you mentioned in my intro, Lisa, since 2012, we work with many large plan clients, and in all cases, the plans have adopted them as their QDIA. And, I would just say when we think back to the Pension Protection Act, right, there were a lot of um, things, behaviors we were seeing, right, in DC plans that the PPA actually really helped and fixed, right? Better asset allocation, higher savings rates, increasing savings rates over time, auto enrollment, right, and really Secure Act and lifetime income is really like that sort of next step, right? And sort of how do we fix or provide guaranteed income to participants, just like those who either still have pensions or potentially could have had in the past. And really, the best way and the most effective way to do that is through the default option. We know that participants have plenty of other things to worry about. They're not necessarily going to do these things on their own. We all have our personal experiences with friends and family that we try to get them to pay attention to their retirement plans, right? And even with that, a lot of prompting that doesn't always happen. So, we've sort of seen this show before, right? And, we do believe that that is going to be the most effective way to really make the most difference for as many American workers as we can as an industry. And it's one thing we definitely want plan sponsors and advisors and consultants to be thinking about.
I would just add, right, and I think with respect to default, right, getting people into a program and getting people to become more familiar with an investment option that has guaranteed income in it, it's absolutely critical to do that. I think there's perhaps in terms of sort of defaulting people into taking the income, that might be a bridge too far.
That's something, Keith. I think that's a really interesting topic. And, on our preps, we discussed that word utilization, right? And what does that mean, right? Is it being in the solutions for the first place and or actually taking the income when you are retired, right? And everybody's got unique and personal circumstances, right? And that's one thing I think will take time to see as well. Plan sponsors and some that we are working with will actually sort of auto activate at RMD age, for example, right? A time when there's plenty of personal circumstances and reasons why some participants might not activate or take their benefit, their guaranteed income right at retirement. And once you kind of get to that point, that is a place that maybe makes sense for auto activation.
I think one of the most exciting things is even if we just listen to this conversation, we're talking through defaults and then how do you go even further with auto default. 5-10 years ago, we were talking about how do we just get solutions in plan? How do we get a simple solution and a plan? So even the evolution of this conversation in the past 5, I would say even in some instances, the past 2 to 3 years is absolutely incredible and shows just how much progress we're making.
But, back to that point of access, right? Because if we want participants to utilize these solutions, they have to be available. And to that end, Keith, you have been doing some work exploring sponsor perceptions, one of the key stakeholders and decision makers to enhance access. What have you been learning from plan sponsors?
Well, thanks for that question, Lisa. I would just tell you that we recently fielded a survey of 400 plan sponsors across all sizes. It was sort of brand blind or neutral, right? No names of any company were utilized in that survey. What we discovered that is primarily on sponsors' minds with respect to in-plan guarantees now is flexibility. So that seems to be the key word that we were seeing in terms of where their heads are at. And one type of flexibility that plan sponsors are looking for is with respect to participant choice. And what we saw is that participants or sponsors want participants to have the ability and the choice to move into and out of a guaranteed solution with full liquidity. Anybody on this call, that's probably not that surprising, but that continues to be a strong theme with plan sponsors, right? The notion of, hey, we're going to force you into a solution and it's got any kind of strings attached to it, that remains something that is inconsistent with 401k generally, and so we saw that loud and clear in our survey. Sponsors also want to empower participants to choose how much income they want to guarantee in retirement. So I think that may manifest itself as, well, we'll default you in, but you should have some flexibility to increase or decrease that guaranteed amount of income, to the extent that you're engaging in, looking at your retirement planning with the guarantee as a key component. And then I think the other aspect of it that we did see is flexibility on when to take guaranteed payments. So and that's where I was getting to my point earlier where I said it might be a bridge too far to kind of force people to do it, right? So plan sponsors want participants to have the flexibility to not be in an irrevocable situation with respect to electing income. And I think many of the designs that are on the market today provide that flexibility. So I think as an industry, we're doing a good job of clearly listening to what sponsors want for their participants. And then the last type of flexibility that sponsors are looking for is with respect to record keeping. And what I mean by that is they expect that the solution will work very well with their current plan design and with the current record keeping platform that they're on. And I think if I read between the lines a little bit there, it's also with the notion of I should be able to, if I adopt a solution today, I should be able to, if I, for whatever reason, choose to use a different record keeper at some point in the future, I shouldn't have to unwind that solution and then reset that up somewhere else. Clearly, I think what's being reflected there is probably more of a small, mid-size to large plan concern, right? If you're a mega plan, you may have more bargaining power to make a record keeper change and get what you want. But I think for people that are more in the take it or leave it record keeping solutions, this is going to become a growing concern, right? They don't want to be sort of stuck where they are if there's other reasons why they might want to change record keepers at some point in the future. And then I guess the last sponsor finding that I wanted to note was just the overwhelmingly favorable viewpoint that sponsors have on guaranteed income solutions now. What we found is that we asked them generally about their interest in guaranteed income and the fit and value that they think that guaranteed income solutions can have for their plan. And on all three of those types of questions, the responses were 90% or more favorable. And that's definitely, I think, reflects a huge evolution in terms of the thinking of plan sponsors about guaranteed income solutions today.
Keith, was there anything that surprised you about sponsor preferences or for features or for design?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an evolution in the sponsors that we talk to, whereas I think if we had done this survey and based on what I know about surveys that were done years ago, there was a bias towards multi-insurer solutions that that plan sponsors really said, well, hey, what would scare me is putting all of my assets with one insurance company. What we saw when we did this survey, which was notable, was that and plan sponsors now seem much more receptive to a single insurer solution, and they highlighted a few benefits for why that's the case. So one of the benefits that was highlighted was service. 55% of sponsors believe that it was important to have a single point of contact for service and support, and they thought that a single insurer solution would be a way to get that. And another highlight or benefit that they highlighted was around communication and education, where 48% of sponsors believe that it would be easier to communicate and educate participants on payout options and other features and benefits of a in-plan guaranteed income solution if it was a single insurer type of product. What we asked them also to say what kind of challenges they would see in a single insurer solution, and the challenges that they brought up were what you would expect. About half the sponsors responded that these were their top three challenges with a single insurer solution. One was the maintaining the competitiveness of the product over time, right? So they recognize that a multi-insurer solution might have some sort of inherent competition in it that makes the solution more competitive over time. Insurer capacity came up as well, right? Like, can one insurer handle our ongoing needs? And then the last one was risk diversification. But in all cases, the overwhelming opinion was that the benefits outweighed the perceived risks. So that was a real surprise for us.
Keith, what was the size of the sponsors that you were doing your research with?
So There were 400 sponsors, and they ranged in size across the spectrum. So we were looking for a broad sampling. So I think if you base that sampling on what's out there in the different segments of the market, right? It was probably very limited at the highest end of the market, and probably more concentrated in the small and middle size of the market.
Jen, I am curious your thoughts, knowing that you focus on the larger end of the market. What do you see in terms of preference for single versus multi-insurer?
Yeah, sure. And then Keith, it might be interesting to try to look at those results broken out by plan sponsor size, since you've got the data, right? To see how that looks. Love to follow up on that. So in the large and mega side, where we have begun to see much more adoption, and I can share some comments about that. We've certainly seen both be adopted, multi-insurer. Certainly some single insurer. Our solution we offer today is multiple insurers, hitting on many of the aspects of what Keith was just saying in terms of the survey results on what are advantages of multi-insurer versus single insurer. Single insurer can certainly also be fine. I think it's interesting, those results, Keith, is some of that also, as Karen was pointing at the beginning, sort of the evolution of the understanding of these types of solutions, right? Which we know we all have a lot of continued education that we need to do, right? But is some of that just the marketplace or DC sponsors, consultants, advisors beginning to be more comfortable with insurance and DC plans in the first place, right? Where they actually may have a point of view over single insurer versus multi-insurer. Years ago, no one would even really know how to answer that question, as a DC plan sponsor. So I think that's an interesting evolution. What I would say about the large and mega size plans, right, is they're going to be spending a lot more time on thinking through both of those options, right? And what's right for their plan, thinking through the pros and the cons, being concerned as a fiduciary around whichever selection they make, and are they hiring somebody as a fiduciary to make that selection? It's that ongoing monitoring as well. What are their views, and what do they think is going to be the best in terms of the pros and the cons that Keith, very in a balanced way asked in the survey, which I think was really good.
Karen, as we all spoke to prepare, it sounds like you have a better than most pulse on the smaller plan and smaller advisor market. What do you see in terms of sponsor preferences for single versus multi-insurer, other preferences that might vary from the mid-size and the large market?
Yeah, and if you asked me that a few years ago, I would definitely have a more binary answer, where I think small plans were looking at one preference, where larger plans, for everything and every reason that Jen just mentioned, we're looking at it in different ways. And what I would say is a lot of that education, as Jen mentioned, has helped to change the conversation. We have solutions that are part of a multi-insurer arrangement. We have solutions that are single insurer arrangements here at Pacific Life. And what we find is it doesn't necessarily matter the plan size. What matters is the preferences, some of the, I'll say, training and education as the advisors and the plans are going through, and better understanding these solutions. And if I think through, just as an example, the PSEA has an education program for sponsors now, which is fantastic. And it goes through 9 or 10 attributes that plans should be thinking about as they're selecting these solutions. And it's not a one size fits all. So I go back to that binary comment. Plans are really looking, and the advisor and consulting community has done a fantastic job in helping to support this. They're looking at what is the underlying demographic of the actual plan. What does the plan need? Where are people in the savings and accumulation part of that retirement plan? What are other needs and demographics as that comes up, or what other needs do the demographics of the plan bring up? And based on that, I don't think it's necessarily a binary single or multi-insurer. It's dependent on all these factors. So even in the small market, where you might think there's an even bigger tilt to simplicity or dependency on the record keepers as they continue to evolve solutions, it really is a more mature conversation around all of the attributes of the underlying plan, the underlying participant demographics and needs. And that's translating into both single and multi-insurer adoption of solutions.
Jen, you teased us a little with views from the large end of the market. What do you see happening with larger plans and the consultants who serve them?
Yeah, I thought it might be interesting to share since we've been, I kind of always joke, at this for so long. We launched our solution again. It's been live since 2012 for a very large plan, who many are probably aware of. They've been, very active, talking in the marketplace and the conference circuit, and we've added additional plans along the way. And because we've seen, really been there for this whole evolution and are so glad to have so many others, helping with this critical topic as well. We've really seen a lot of change. And, one thing that I really wanted to make sure we talked about on today's call, that we can share is that, listen, I know we're, still, there's still a long way to go, right, before many, choose your word, actually have these solutions in their plans. But we are absolutely seeing more adoption, and that's growing in the large and mega market. We know plan sponsors, right, are normally reluctant to be the first one to do anything that's, the slightest bit perceived as being different. The litigation concerns that, many of us talk about, and that being a driving factor, unfortunately, versus what's going to be the most important thing to benefit the participants. And so, we get that. But with lifetime income, it's really critical that plan sponsors, see and know that they no longer need to be the first. There are many that have gone ahead of them. It's no longer one or two or three. It's many, and I'll talk about that in a second, that have already forged the path, right? They have real participants who are benefiting from these solutions, right? And that number is really growing. When I think about the clients that we work with at AB and kind of taken that informal count of plan sponsors, because again, I've yet to really find a really solid third-party source, of information, but just by, being at conferences and paying attention to names, plans that have decided to, use their names in the media, it's definitely more than 20, and I'm talking large, right, mega plans, right, that have a lot of assets, and likely, many more than that. And we continue to see, more increased adoption. And I took a look just, kind of quickly preparing for this at recent articles, right, to sort of compile some names. And, we'll share a few in case everybody's not aware. BlackRock has shared that they've got 14, hopefully I have their number right, plan sponsors signed on $16 billion to date, and they're big names like Avangrid, Adventist Healthcare, Tennessee Valley Retirement, BlackRock's own plan. Sway Research has reported that target date collective investment trusts with guaranteed income have grown to about 22 billion in assets, and that doesn't even account solutions like ours, and we're about another 12 or so. TIAA has shared that their assets tied to target date portfolios within plan annuities rose 40% to $50 billion, right? And then there's other, large names that many of us that are spending time with the large and mega plan clients. Unum, Yale, University of California, RTX, right, is one of our clients, as well as the State University Retirement System of Illinois. So it's growing. They're not first. It's not even just one or two or three. It's many more. And I hope plan sponsors realize, again, they don't need to feel like they're doing something so different than their other large plans, right? People feel comfortable when their peers are doing similar things as well. And you know what, if just to make a couple of comments about consultants that we're seeing in the larger side of the market, the larger investment consultants, that's another place where we've really seen a very big difference over the last few years, and really a lot of credit goes to the hard work that they are doing. Years ago, it was sort of, maybe they were a little more reactionary if they had a plan come to them. Maybe many plans were not coming to them asking about lifetime income, and we've really seen a difference. And I'd say there's really three key themes around the investment consultants that we've seen. One is they've been doing the research. One recently was talking about the fact that they spent 12 months researching so they could understand the differences and the trade-offs between all of these solutions so that they can characterize them on behalf of their plan sponsor clients, and figure out which ones relate to the needs of their different plans differently. Second thing is many of them are beginning to rate the lifetime income solutions similarly to sort of regular investment options, right? And I think, anything that uses sort of a more familiar framework is going to be helpful and, and useful. And then, many have shared that they're getting a lot more interest from clients, just sort of anecdotally, two different consultants recently in conversations. One had said that there was a lot of inbound interest after the Secure Act, of course. And now they're seeing it again, especially with union plans, any plans that understand pensions, especially a lot of the state type plans, right? Public fund side. And then another one had said to me just about 2 weeks ago that he is seeing more interest in the last few months than over the last many years, right? And this is someone who works with very large plans, mostly on the public fund side. And just from having a conversation recently, at an AB event, just thought I would share a couple of things the consultant said, non-attributed, of course, that, basically as investors, right, consultants squeeze every bit of investment growth, but helping participants sleep at night goes a long way too, right? Now, so the why are they helping plan sponsors? They say we help clients alleviate risk. Delivering retirement income is part and parcel to what we do. And then one said, I'm paraphrasing, solutions are evolving. Plan sponsors can't wait for a perfect solution, need to find one that works best and get started. So again, really seeing the consultants do a lot to be able to help their plan sponsors get started.
Okay. So with that experience going back almost over a decade, what does success look like? Do you have examples or lessons on what leads to a successful selection process as well as successful implementation?
Yeah, no, that's all good questions. I won't go back quite as far as 2012, but thought maybe I would share a little bit about one of the plans that we work with. And again, some of the people on the call right now may have seen them, talk about their own plan at various conferences. And that's the State University Retirement System of Illinois. We implemented our lifetime income strategy with them and their members back in 2020 as the default option. The shorthanded to SERS. SERS is really the system in the state of Illinois. It's about 61 employers, right? Colleges and universities. Their employees are not Social Security eligible. They have very diverse demographics, just like most, especially large organizations. Members range from professors, teachers, clerical, facilities, staff, and have really now 2 plans that the lifetime income strategy is available in. The thing that was sort of really interesting about their retirement savings plan is that at the time they were making some changes. I should say they also had 2 different record keepers. They had a long list of investment menus, investment menu options that really needed to be simplified. So they kind of made a lot of changes. At the time, they had limited distribution options from the plan. Members could either use 100% of their account balance to buy a traditional annuity or take a lump sum. But if they took the lump sum, they would forfeit employee retiree healthcare benefits. And what they would see is the members were not comfortable with making that irrevocable decision to buy the traditional annuity, and they actually would forfeit the healthcare benefits. So one of the things that they wanted to do, and again, they made other changes with the plan as well, is find a guaranteed income, retirement income solution that is a lot more flexible and would allow their members to feel comfortable using it, having access to their money at all times, having some, as Keith was talking about, ability to tailor it to their individual needs, and not give up these healthcare benefits as well. And so, working with them, we implemented the solution that's been in place since then. It was implemented as the default. It does allow the plan sponsor to have some flexibility in that They can default people in at different retirement ages and secure income levels without getting too into the weeds of how the solution works. So what you can have, participant can have 100% guaranteed income by the time they reach age 65 or whatever their retirement age is. And they can change those sort of settings for different cohorts of employees. And then the participants can also personalize that on their own as well. And so what we saw after the implementation, everyone defaulted in. 93% of the participants stayed in the default option. The longer they stay in, basically, the longer once they get past the first year and see the benefit of the solution, the longer they'll stay in really for overall longevity and retention. What they saw was that the participants appreciated having higher balances and kind of higher income over time because of the design of solution, being able to continue to stay invested in a balanced portfolio and delivering performance over the time. And we also saw a lot of actual engagement with the communications. We offer them a website where members, participants can engage and run different benefits estimates to see how their future guaranteed income may build up over time. And what we actually saw too is that relationship between your future guaranteed income and today, participants, when they start to understand that relationship, actually increase their savings rates.
I'm hearing elements of what Keith was saying about flexibility. I'm hearing elements of what Karen was saying about education. Curious, Karen, what have you seen or what do you think is going to be needed to help with selection and implementation of income options?
Yeah. So I think one thing that we haven't talked about today is, and that example perfectly illustrates it, is the power of being a differentiated employer when you offer solutions like this. And I will use that same reference as advisors and thinking through how the advisor community, similar with the consultant community, has really started to embrace these solutions in new and different ways. It is now becoming a practice differentiator. Now, over time, as this trend continues, I think it's going to be a given that advisors and consultants are going to be helping plan sponsors. And the conversation is going to be, how come you didn't help me? And why didn't you recommend versus how should I recommend? But I think with where we are right now in that life cycle, it truly is a employer differentiator to be an employer of choice. It's truly a practice differentiator as I think through the community supporting plans and making these decisions. And going back to the question, then what are the selection factors that are going to be helpful in making that? That's evolving. So as you heard Jen say, some of the larger consultants are coming up with that individualized for their practice and actually rating these solutions. The advisor community with ARA has an education program. I mentioned the PSCA version for plan sponsors. We're seeing more of these retirement income curriculums as well as selection tools coming into the marketplace to help, because we're hearing more and more the ask from plans to say, help me select that right solution for my plans. And I would mention, similar to what Jen mentioned about the trend in this last quarter, I really feel like I'll use the hockey stick or the J curve example. We're at the bottom of the hockey stick, and now we're ready to move up quickly on that curve. The conversation is no longer what are these solutions and tell me why and give me the stats and how many people are turning 65 each day. And we're seeing the Social Security system and kind of the breakdown of the three-legged stool. We're past that. And now the conversation is help show me which solution makes sense. And I do think the curriculums that are evolving, the selection tools that are evolving, we're going to continue to see that because advisors, consultants, plan sponsors are going to continue to need to find a way to select. I think, Keith, you said it perfectly. Regardless of how you slice and dice the data, over 90% each time plan sponsors said, we want to move forward with these solutions. So the necessary next step is how do we as the industry help them do that and provide more of that education, tools, selection support?
Well, one thing I forgot to mention, just in the example that I gave with the SERS plan, the very first step in the process for them was to bring in a consultant. So that they did have help, right, to think through the record keeper choice, to think through which solution best matches their needs and understand, again, the sort of characteristics of each of the solutions available and finding the right match with the needs of their own plan participants.
Keith, any thoughts on what's going to be needed, what's working with the selection process and implementation?
So I think I want to just continue to emphasize something that Jen said, which is sponsor conviction and engagement that this is the right solution for their population, I think is hugely important. Jen, you mentioned the SIRS example, and I have seen video and heard them speak before about some of their decisioning. There's also others where the plan sponsor has taken a concerted effort to make sure that they're putting in place the education necessary so that when they do make the step of putting in an income solution, that they're engaging participants at the right time and with the right tools for the program to achieve success. And I mean, I think we all have to be realistic about what success means, because there's probably some folks that, for whatever reason, have been marginal participants in the defined contribution space and may not be able to, you know, they have different concerns than people who've saved a lot for retirement. And then there's probably some people at the very top echelon who, you know, for whatever reason, either because of other investments or family wealth or whatever, they may not feel that they need to have an income solution, and so they may not use one either. But there's going to be quite a number of employees in America that are in that middle group that can really benefit from this. So having some ability and that flexibility to recognize that we have different populations, and you can't expect, I mean, clearly if nobody's using it, that's probably a problem. If everybody's using it, that's maybe not a problem, but it's in the same way, but it's unrealistic to think that that could be achieved. So another aspect, I think, of what's going to help drive success is decision-making tools to support not just plan sponsors in adding a decision to the plan, but also for participants, right? If you think about the healthcare choices that people have to make now versus maybe 10 or 20 years ago, right? A lot of, you know, there's silver, bronze, and gold healthcare plan options that are available in many employers. And quite frankly, participants in healthcare plans have to make a lot of choices too. And there's been an emerging group of companies that are creating decision-making tools to help with that. It would be great to see more evolution on those participant level tools in conjunction with the product solutions, so that people have the ability to make decisions on, you know, what to, if there is customization available in their product solution, what they should customize. And then when they're ready to start taking income, how to make that decision. What's the right amount of income to guarantee for their particular situation? What other factors should they be considering, et cetera? So I think that would be a big driver of success and keep participants off the sidelines when they can benefit from this as well.
Keith, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. And I'll underscore the word conviction that you used as it relates to the plan sponsor. We've seen a significant increase in plan sponsors adopting solutions even in the past 6 months versus the, first half of 24, and even 2 years, an even greater percent. And, 2 examples come to mind in particular where the plan sponsor not only taking that conviction, but translating that into direct engagement with their participants has been huge. And we've seen the value of that in terms of utilization and driving to participant adoption. So completely agree with you that that is going to be a necessary step as we think through what is the barrier to adoption, and using the words that you were using earlier in terms of access. I think that is an important piece. Is not only does there need to be access, there also needs to be the corollary participant engagement support and tools that are provided to help ultimately get to that utilization.
Thanks. We are having such a good conversation. I want to make sure I get some of my questions in before we open things up. One topic that came up as we were all chatting to prepare for this was language, the language we use, how we describe these solutions. So, Keith, I'll start with you. What role do you think the language we use plays in the success of these solutions? How do we improve the lexicon that we're using?
That's a great question, Lisa. And I wish I had the silver bullet answer that we could use to get first everybody in the industry to be more consistent in how we speak about things. And I come from the insurance industry where it seems like we create a new acronym once a year for a new feature on one of our products. I understand how that can be intimidating to folks who may not engage every day in the financial services world. And by that, I mean participants and plan sponsors that are not in financial services for their profession. As to what we can do, I'm a big fan of plain language explanations. I'm a big fan of studying what's worked for other segments of the financial services industry, or even what's already working in 401k in terms of helping people understand, and then trying to test and learn. Right. So, if we don't succeed the first time, we need to really learn from what we're doing and continue to evolve how we're speaking about our products and the benefits of them.
To Jen, leaning on your history in this market, is there language that works? What are you seeing in the evolution of the category and the language we're using?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Lisa, you'd asked me earlier, what have we learned over the years that we've had a solution? I would just say we have gotten better with our language, right? It is a constant thing we're always working on and challenging ourselves internally at AllianceBernstein. How do we continue to simplify? We look at materials we did, I want to say 10 years ago, let alone 8 years ago, and you look back at them and we thought it was simple at the time, and you read it with a new lens, and right, you keep simplifying. So doing things like testing language, right, which I know you do quite a bit of too, Lisa, right, and others do as well, as simple as possible. But again, it's sort of going as simple as you can, asking a friend or relative to take a look at it, and then sometimes simplifying even more. Always going with the assumption that, as Keith was saying, in many cases, even the plan sponsor, even if it's the investment side of a more sophisticated, larger plan, doesn't always know, especially the insurance vernacular, right? So continuing to kind of take it down, and use those simple words. There are many or some efforts, in different industry organizations around trying to get even folks in the industry who are participating to use the same language. And, I think that's something we all need to kind of focus on as well, just so that we can really clarify, right, as much as possible, even like I said, for plan sponsors, consultants, and advisors who are still in learning mode, let alone the participants in the plans.
Karen, you, I believe, have also been involved in some of the efforts to try and find some unified language for our industry. What are you seeing happening around terminology that we use?
Yeah, so thank you for referencing that. So at DECIA, we're actually conducting a lexicon project, and part of that is to get to a streamlined, unified vernacular across the industry. In terms of findings, I think the biggest aha is we need to do this, and we need to do this now. So I think it just underscores the importance of the work. And I'll echo what Keith and Jen said. Like the adjectives are simple, plain language, impactful, but we need to do that in a way that resonates with participants, and it needs to be unified so that if we find that there are 3 words that are resonating, but we're divided in how we're using that, that is going to continue to make it even harder for people to adopt, for participants to understand. And to Jen's point, not just participants, plan sponsors, advisors, consultants. So I think it underscores the importance of the work with that, defining theme of we need to find one unified language set that really illustrates simplicity, plain language, and impact.
Well, certainly this researcher would appreciate a unified, consistent term. The language impacts even the research we try to do to help the industry, and how we ask people what they have and what they want. So I've enjoyed this so much. I'm going to open things up to see if there are any questions from our audience with our last few minutes. I see one here for Keith, someone curious about the research you conducted and is it available anywhere?
So right now we haven't published that research, but it is something that we plan to do. And Lisa, I'll be sure to let you know that when we have our thought piece out so that we can you can pass it along at that time.
Absolutely. And I know everyone here does really good work. A lot of the stuff I've been casually referencing is from Greenwald's annual In-Plan Insights program, which several companies help sponsor and make possible every year. But Karen, your team does some good research. Anything you'd like to point to audience members to?
Yeah, I had mentioned the 28% stat in terms of the annuity literacy. So on our website, you can find our Decoding Retirement study. We're continuing to go a layer deeper into that in terms of longevity literacy as well. So we should have something out by the end of the year around that, and just continuing to look at some of the trends that we're seeing, how it impacts participants, and then how as a company we can leverage those insights to further help our clients.
Great. And Jen, where can we find AB's resources and research?
Sure, thank you for asking. We do also do plan participant research. It's called Inside the Minds of Plan Participants. We've been doing it for nearly 20 years and have a number of lines of questioning around guaranteed income, retirement income, target date funds. We're soon publishing our most recent research. There's also some interesting questions about AI and other related topics. We also have a really good investment piece. We are an investment management firm, and our investment team has done a great job really thinking through the different types of income solutions from an investment perspective and creating really a framework for plan sponsors and consultants to use to try to compare and contrast the different types of ways to a participant can draw income in retirement, again, really with that investment lens. And, it's very much about trade-offs, right? There's different ways to do it. What are the right trade-offs and what a plan sponsor is looking for on behalf of the participants?
Thanks. Another thing that I think we said very concisely as a group when we were preparing, right? There's not really a right or a wrong here, right? The goal is access. Let's get these solutions in plan with the right due diligence, education, and communication. So I just want to thank you again for being here. I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us today on behalf of Greenwald and all the panelists and their firms, Pacific Life, AllianceBernstein, and Guardian. As I mentioned, this is Greenwald's anniversary year, so please stay tuned for more. You can read about our monthly webinars and about our upcoming in-person Health and Wealth Symposium in November, Washington, D.C., on our website. And again, thank you all for being here and celebrating along with us. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.